Welcome to CROSSTALK. As the country grapples with governance challenges and trust deficit in leadership, the voice of the church has come out very strongly and boldly, speaking truth to power. But the overriding question is, will the church maintain the momentum?
The current universal education funding model is causing more pain to students, some of whom have dropped out of the much-needed education due to exorbitant fees and upkeep.
The family of the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya wishes to call for a national convention for 2 or 3 days that shall be co-chaired by eminent Kenyans. The convention should focus on the country agreeing on the solutions and consensus on the above outlined matters of grave national concerns that we have captured so far.
We advise, as the clergy, the president, if possible, to avoid making more promises at this time, and instead focus in prioritizing flagship projects and those areas that are closer to the hearts of Kenyans, and focus on delivering results of achievements. At this time, we need to have a scorecard of what has been achieved.
Is this the reawakening of the prophetic voice of the church? To answer that question is Canon Evans Omollo, the Provost of All Saints Cathedral. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, John Paul.
Yes.
My great pleasure to be on CROSSTALK,
yes.
My very first time on Family TV, and
yes.
I'm truly delighted by the invitation.
Thank you so much for accepting to be on CROSSTALK and having you on this episode. If you look at what has been happening the past 2 weeks, the voice of the church has spoken so loud, and people have said that the voice of the church is the voice of the people and is the voice of God. Is this a one-off, or this is the reawakening of that lost prophetic voice of the church?
Thank you, John Paul, and our viewers. I guess from where I sit as a Christian leader in this country, I see it differently. My perspective is that the church has always spoken. And I guess what has been missing is a deliberate capturing of that voice and dissemination of that so that it permeates the different spaces in our country that needs to be. And so when newsmakers or news gatherers pick only what they want, then the voice of the church tends to be drowned. But if you look properly, even from just recently, the last election, 2022, before that and even after, the church has always spoken and issued statements. Even from All Saints Cathedral, where I serve, we've always spoken. But it's just that that voice hasn't been, for me, picked up and amplified sufficiently. But secondly, I also think that there are sections of the church that have felt betrayed by what's going on in the country currently. And you'd honestly believe me and agree with me if you live in this country that the current Kenya Kwanza government has massively let Kenyans down. By the way we see they are running this country, you see like they're gambling literally with everything. They're gambling with growing the economy. They're gambling with healthcare system, which we'll talk about a little more. They're gambling with education. They're gambling with literally everything, and nothing seems to be working. The only thing that is working is chasing away people that are not desirable in eating part of this bread-based food that is put on the table.
Yeah, because someone will argue that the church voice only got amplified because there was the absence of the political class voice that aligns with the people. That if there was the political class, let's say the opposition, coming out strongly to speak to these things, even as much as the government, the church has spoken, that voice could have still been submerged.
I doubt. And my thesis is different because you look at, let me just single out names for now. You look at Archbishop Muheria, who is one of the big faces from the Conference of Catholic Bishops side. Remember him, how stingy his statements were, even around the 22 elections. Solid and has been very, very consistent. My predecessor, Canon Sami Wainaina, the 13th Provost of All Saints, remember, even in the run-up to elections, even after, very solid and very consistent. And I can count other voices. Time and space does not allow us. So those voices have been there. Probably to, in a certain way, agree with what you're saying, that absence of a strong civil society and a strong opposition has created a bigger vacuum that now the church speaking seems to be really resonating with more people.
Is the church going to sustain the momentum?
Definitely. I would want to advise my colleagues, if I was in our space, to advise that is part of our role. That is part of our mandate. And so it should not be seen as a new emergence, but it should be part and parcel of the workings of the church. Because whereas our primary mandate is to proclaim the gospel, to disciple people, to equip people for eternity, but eternity is years and years and years ahead. We still live here. And therefore, the church cannot keep a blind eye to the many, many socio-political issues that are affecting the population today. And so Jesus says in John chapter 10, verse 10, that I came that they may have life, and that life should be in abundance. So that abundant life must be experienced here. As long as that is not being experienced, and as long as saboteurs of that abundant life become the political class, the church has an opportunity to really speak and demand answers. And really broadening that, even including how our resources are utilized, because that is one of the ways the government really mishandles the welfare of the people. So the church will sustain, and I don't see this dying out, and I believe this is a better space. Even the media is now recognizing that, okay, this voice that we have been ignoring, because that's really is my thesis. This voice that we've been ignoring is sting enough. This voice is sharp enough to cut. And I want you to really reflect and look at, again, the Anglican Church. At least, let me say, where I serve at All Saints Cathedral, we've never granted platform to any politician to further their ideologies because from that pulpit.
People are arguing, and when you saw the dailies this week, you saw the power, money, and church as an headline for the Catholic Church and the institutions that church runs. Same will be said of All Saints. There are some churches that are well established that the political money will not really compromise.
How much do you need to buy the Roman Catholic Church? How much do you need to buy the Anglican Church? And so, and here probably I'll be a little offensive, and so I will. There are little groupings of churches that see politicians and the political class all the way to government as an opportunity to mint money to oil a lavish lifestyle. And therefore proximity to power, proximity to a politician, I won't mention their name, is an opportunity for me then to get these things from government, to get this money, call them for fundraisers, call them to help me build this, call them to help me do this. That, John Paul, from where I sit, as a student of the Bible, compromises the voice of the church. So when a section of the church goes on a hunting spree, looking for political buddies to go to bed with, then, as you rightly say, it compromises the voice of the church. Because the moment I take money from a politician, will I have the moral authority to question them when they do something wrong? When I'm seen carrying a huge envelope from State House, or when I'm seen driving a Prado given to me by a governor or a member of parliament, will I have the moral authority to question them? I will not. So you lose your moral authority at that point. And my colleagues who are ministers like me, you're an apostle, you're a prophet, you are whatever you call yourself, my free counsel to you is please don't accept goodies from politicians. I know some of us would say, oh, that is money belonging to us. We are just reclaiming what the devil had taken. We sanctify and we get to use this.
Running over.
We must be careful by taking their baits. The baits that once you bite it, then you're fixed in a corner.
Reverend, help me then understand, as much as the church is calling for accountability from the political leaders, how is then the church going to call for the same accountability
on their part?
On their part.
We need some form of regulation around churches or religious groupings, not just the church alone, including other faiths. Because, as you rightly point out, so you'll have this good. We are told where there is original, there is always a fake. But the presence of the fake does not nullify the authenticity of the original. Yeah. The original remains original. So when you have 2, 3 fake Shakahola types, it should not dirtify the clean side of the church. And therefore, that's why I totally agree with some form of regulation of the church and creating parameters and systems that can pick out rogue pastors or compromised individuals who open churches as business ventures to grow themselves. You know, you collect offertory on a Sunday, then you bundle all that into the boot of your car. You go count with your wife in the bedroom, and then you deposit and you go on holidays in Dubai. That is unacceptable. So there must be systems of governance to hold people accountable. That's why I support, and I'm part of a movement called Hesabika, which brings together different groupings of churches to create a code of conduct for churches and church ministers to hold people accountable.
Okay. Oh, good. Of course, talking about accountability, last week we saw the president issue a State of the Nation address in Parliament. What's your assessment on that?
Quite some good rhetoric to appease a very disillusioned population because Kenyans are increasingly getting dissatisfied and impatient with how the Kenya Kwanza government is running the affairs of this country. As I've said, it appears that they were really never prepared in terms of driving this country to where their manifesto spelled out, what their manifesto spelled out. The president never really addressed the monster called corruption. If there is one thing I have against the government is corruption, because there is no goodwill right from the president to address the issues of corruption.
But he would argue and say, I've cancelled the Adani deal based on allegations of corruption and bribery.
Let me tell you, that is actually shooting yourself on the foot. Because what is the role of government? The government has an entire established machinery. As we get into partnership with a partner, he has all the way, including NIS, including DCI, including Economic Crimes Unit, an established system that if they're not capable of even establishing the credibility of the partners we bring on board, you have Interpols, you have even international agencies that can help you put Adani under the microscope and establish that this is a good person. It means the president is admitting that his government failed to do due process to establish. You remember, why I'm really pessimistic about what he said, and I believe it's a peer reaction, is because issues were raised about Adani way before, 3 months ago, or even longer. But he only pulled through it because of the broad-based government, which you have baptized the bread-based government, because people who want to eat, like the former opposition leader, joined in and are eating. So when he got that backing, then he felt he can bully his way through. It's only the revelation by the American government that made the president to take back steps and cancel this. Otherwise, he was not going to cancel because it was already on the tail end of delivery, both the Cathedral and the airport. So this is a reaction to what has happened in the US. There has been never goodwill on the side of the president to fight corruption. John Paul, as I sign off on that, to confirm that, look at what has happened to individuals mentioned in corruption. They're being cleansed by the system, cleansed by parliament, and ODPP forced to withdraw their cases. The president and his team have never had the goodwill to fight corruption. And therefore, Adani is just a confirmation of that same thing.
Do you think that those that were involved in these contractual deals with Adani should be brought to book?
Absolutely. You know, when you are signing a contract of that magnitude, you know, it's not just about the actual doing, the actual dispensing of the money to do the renovation of the airport. There are lots of preparatory things. There are a lot of costs that we incur, from legal to consultancy. Monies have been lost. From where I sit, every single person who was involved in this and who misled, if he were misled, the president should be brought to book and account and pay for these monies. And that's why we ask the EACC to really pick up these matters and investigate thoroughly to the core.
But we've also said EACC is a toothless dog.
Yeah, in a sense, you would say.
All that thought, we take a short break. When we come back, we pick from it. But we also want to listen to what the president said about his desire to fight corruption.
Honorable members, I have stated in the past and now reiterate today that in the face of undisputed evidence or credible information on corruption, I will not hesitate to take decisive action. Accordingly, I now direct, in furtherance of the principles enshrined in Article 10 of the Constitution on transparency and accountability, and based on new information provided by investigative agencies and partner nations, that the procuring agencies within the Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum immediately cancel the ongoing procurement process for the JKIA expansion public-private partnership transaction. As well
as Welcome back to CROSSTALK. If you're just joining us, we are talking about the reawakening of the church in terms of its accountability voice. And we've seen in the recent past, the church has come out very strongly demanding accountability from this government. And joining me in this discussion is the Right Reverend Canon Evans Omollo. He's a provost at All Saints Cathedral. If you have any opinion or views or feedback to our discussion, you can share your comments on our SMS line 20316 or use our WhatsApp line 0786 316 316, and we'll be in a position to sample some of your feedback even as we go along this conversation. Rev, just before we took a break, we were talking about accountability and mostly corruption. And you are calling on the EACC to come out very strongly to investigate some of these issues. And we are saying EACC has been backing, but it can't bite.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the weakest links in the fight against corruption. When you have an anti-corruption agency that does not really have full prosecutorial powers, then you're crippled. They will pick out issues, but then being forwarded to ODPP probably being compromised, and if any case they make their way to the judiciary, they will be compromised there. So the biggest problem we have is that when you're fighting corruption, then you're dealing with powers that be. And powers that be will not sit back and relax and see you do your dirty game on them. So they're fighting back, and majority of them are political class who have close connection to power. And EACC being a state agency, there are lots of threats that go in there. We have conversations with them, and many of them are threatened. And you realize that the will to go all the way is not there. I wish we could learn from our other countries in Africa, where we've seen boldness in terms of prosecuting people all the way and jailing. In this country, if we could jail only 2 or 3 ministers and they serve jail time and people see, we will begin to see changes.
But why is it so difficult? It seems like in our country, justice is very elusive.
Exactly. It goes for the highest bidder. If you can pay for it, then why not take it? Today they say, why do we need to struggle in court if I can buy the judge? And pretty much everything in terms of political positions is auctioned. You cannot just be a minister in county assembly. You cannot just be appointed a director of something without coughing something. So justice and fairness and integrity are on trial. And John Paul, I'm afraid that the trajectory we are taking as a country is not very good for us, especially for the future. We must say enough is enough, take a U-turn, and begin to demand good governance. But secondly, I think we have an opportunity, even as a people, to elect people who are clean into positions of leadership and demand appointment of people who are not tainted or mentioned in corruption. Because the more you appoint or elect people who are corrupt, the more you are perpetuating corruption, and it becomes very difficult to fight it. That if a member of parliament who's bribed his way all the way through election gets into that office, they will want to perpetuate that and compromise the system. So really for me is electing people of integrity and demanding that integrity reigns in all departments of government.
We've seen with the current political climate that we have in the country, the conversations towards the 2027 general elections has already begun.
Exactly.
Is that a priority now for the common person?
It's very unfortunate, and that tells you that for politicians, and this show is about that today, their primary interest is their positions in power to amass that wealth. Why would you begin talking about elections that are coming 3-4 years from now? Why are we not serving the people? Because we are elected to serve the people. The primary definition of leadership for me, from where I sit as a student of the Bible, is to serve the people. The Bible says in Mark chapter 10, verse 41 to 45, that the Son of Man came to the world not to be served, but to serve and to give his life for many. So service is the language that we should be speaking today. But because people want resources, money, positions, then we are talking about a next election, unfortunately.
Is it the right time now for the church to take it over and run with it, to be that voice that the Gen Zs were agitating for, somebody to speak for them?
You see, the problem, again, we have is that we are having this conversation in the backdrop of just 4 months when the Gen Zs completely discredited a larger portion of the church, having compromised, because as we said earlier in this show, that sections of the church are interested more in money, so more in terms of business than in terms of doing kingdom work. To be seen as credible and representing the voice of the people requires, from that section of the church, a rethinking and repackaging and rebranding. Part of that rebranding would mean disengaging with the political class as far as receiving goodies is, deplatforming them from our pulpits so that they do not use that to abuse other people or to marshal votes from there. And the church has an opportunity, golden one, at this time, to rise up and shine, to be that voice that will marshal that transformation that we so desperately need in this country. If we see ourselves as sufficient enough with God on our side, not needing political godfathers or economic bankrollers who will support our church projects.
As we come to a close, there is an issue that, of course, we've talked about on this show quite a number of times, the issue of abduction. And I think the church, the Conference of Catholic Bishops came out very strongly as one of the issues they highlighted in their press statement. What would you say is wrong?
Abductions are a way of dealing with political dissent, are ways of threatening people and emphasizing dictatorship. When you have a section of the country, or you have individuals who have dissenting voices, different opinions, who seem to hold a little space of influence and want to tilt people's thinking towards a desired perspective, what do we do with them? Release the sleuths to go pick them out, take them into the bush somewhere, hold them there for 3 or 4 days in starvation, squeeze them, and raid their social media handles and phones to determine who they're working for. We know that these are not orchestrated by unknown individuals. From where I sit and conversations as a community leader, as a religious leader, I talk to many people. I've talked to many people who were abducted during that time. They were police officers who were directly sent and issued with instructions that go and pick X, go and pick Y. And those who were abducted would later have conversations with them and say, you know, as we're just doing what we're told to do. These are police officers. My call for the Inspector General of Police, my call for the President is that we are a country that is law-abiding, that is democratic. Please stop abduction of faithful citizens who are only expressing their voice, which is enshrined in the Constitution, freedom of expression. Please stop abducting people, stop senselessly killing people, because those are fathers to people, those are mothers to people, those are uncles and breadwinners to certain people. so that we can have a country that we all rejoice in, that is democratic.
Lastly, what will be your call to the Christian, the believer who is watching this program tonight as we wind up?
My fellow believers, I am a born-again believer, met Christ as an 18-year-old boy by the shores of Lake Victoria. Seen Christ transform me and set me on a path to sharing that message of transformation with other people. My invitation to us all is to reclaim our Christian identity and to recognize that, number one, we are known as Christians. Whereas I may be a Luo from Bondo, but I should not allow my Luo-ness from Bondo to override my Christian conviction. So when it comes to my civic responsibility, I should subjugate my cultural and tribal identity to my identity in Christ. That the decisions I make, especially for electing leaders, should be on who is fit to lead this country, regardless of where they come from. So I invite my Christian colleagues, brothers and sisters across this country who are watching us across the board, please let us rise up and represent Christ correctly without allowing culture or tribalism to swallow us up. Amen.
Thank you so much, Canon. Thank you so much for watching CROSSTALK. I pray and hope that you've gotten some perspective to what we need to do as believers, even as we tackle some of these national issues that affect the nation. Until next week, have a good and blessed evening.